All right, everybody, here we are about to start the construction on this old kit. Really cool kit. I'm excited. It's a 1/48 scale Testors Stingbat LHX. Mythical never really existed, but we're going to have some fun, so let's get into it. Before we even get into construction, I'm going to take care of these canopies and do what we need to do to make sure they're crystal clear and looking good and ready to work with them when it's time. So I'm going to snip them off the sprue. I'm going to clean up the edges here. And we're going to give them a little dip in the gauzy glass coat because they will take a little bit of time to dry. So doing this now will kind of kill that time while working on other steps. They're very soft, as you can see, so we want to be pretty careful with them as we trim and work with them so we don't damage them or gouge them or anything like that. This step, normally, I in the past wouldn't even bother with this till it was time to work with the canopies. Then you find yourself just sort of sitting around waiting. This way they'll be done, and then when it's time to work with canopies, we just pick up the canopies and work with them. So I want to be very careful not to put a little pit in the side of the canopy or anything like that. Just want to smooth out that little edge there. A little bit of alcohol to clean off any fingerprints or any smudges or anything before we dip. Fortunately, these little J hooks here make it really easy to hold on to. You don't want to shake the gauzy too much because it'll make a lot of bubbles. We don't want bubbles settling on the canopy parts. And now, I used to do this with Future Floor Wax, which produced kind of the same results, but this gauzy stuff works really, really well. So dip it in, make sure you get the whole thing submerged, but you want to pull it out really nice and slow, which will give any kind of bubbles or anything on there a chance to run off. I just kind of do a re-dip just so I can see if there are any bubbles or anything on there. There's a big bubble holding on. Okay. Just leave it with the edge on the paper towel for a moment. Gravity will help draw down anything that's on there. Do the same thing with this one. Well, working out of order as I so often do, I just decided to get the rotor built because I wanted to see how it was going to look when it was all done. Made a big mistake here. So make sure you read the instructions is what it is. See that flat rotor part, that base? You're not supposed to put glue on it because the entire rotor spins on that flat base plate. And there's a little little part you attach there. So lesson learned, I was able to fix it, and you'll see that the rotor does spin freely. I jumped ahead, and I knew I shouldn't have, but I did. I was excited to see how it works. Fortunately, I was able to clean everything up, and it spins nicely in the end. So well, our first step is assembling the cockpit. And well, actually the first step is decide if you want landing gear up or down. Next, it's assembling the cockpit. And if you see in the instructions, they clearly show you working with some cockpit details, and they mention the cockpit details, but there's cockpit details. There's nothing there. We do have, as we saw in the unboxing, some detail on the instrument panel there, but nothing here. So we're going to have to put something there. Otherwise, what are we going to look at? So I'm going to look for some photo etch we might use, and also some decals we might put on there. But otherwise, I have the seat over here that they mention. It goes in the front. I have both control columns that they talk about, and it looks like this is the pilot's control panel, and that's going to go right there. I'd also like to add an actual HUD, since this doesn't really seem to have one. So let me see what I have in terms of actual accessories we can put there, so there's something to look at. So after a quick coat of satin black, and then I'll do some other features in flat black, I've got some spare 172 scale F16 decals for the cockpit that'll work, and I also have some Mike Grant cockpit decals, and these are all just gauges and buttons and switches for doing decals in your cockpit. And we will be able to use these to just freshen up and spruce up and detail out not only the areas that have nothing, but we can use them on the control panel, on the instrument panel here, because if you notice, the dials and gauges are just blank. So even if we were to try to paint them, it would just be a white blob. So we'll use these and we'll put lots of detail in there. So we've got decals of different kinds in here, lots of Mike Grant and those F16 decals, but what we have basically is a nice decked out cockpit tub with lots of stuff going on. We've got switches, we've got buttons, we've got screens, we've got gauges, some placards, where there was nothing, now we have stuff. And on the instrument panel, we have 6 good dials, and now we'll fill in the rest just like we normally do with painting. Alright, so you can see a big mess over here. I've been really working on this cockpit a little bit more to try to dress it up, and I've got the pilot station done. I added a HUD. I wish I hadn't glued the seats in now so that you can actually see the instrument panel all painted. Let's get some light in there. There we go. So instrument panel is all painted. I did some painting around the instrument shroud just to give the illusion there a little bit more of some controls, some maybe master arm buttons, some do not press unless it's an emergency. We've got all sorts of stuff going on there. I fitted a HUD made out of some clear plastic sprue, and that's on there pretty nicely. So see, now all of a sudden we've got light that you can actually see. Everything is looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. We've even got some upfront controls on the HUD there, looking good. Now what I also did, because this is just, in terms of a high-tech helicopter, this is looking pretty sparse. I took some sprue, and this looks messy now, but when I mask everything off and I paint the canopy, it will look pretty good. We even have some, what do they call it, canopy rail controls and switches and knobs like you would see on the Apache or the Cobra there, just to give a little bit more to look at inside the cockpit, because the cockpit is very bare. Detailing in general on this helicopter is very bare. So you'll have this inside the cockpit to look at, and since we do have some pretty clear canopy, when it's all done, you'll be able to look right on in there and see all that stuff going on. So we'll have an advanced looking cockpit to go with our very advanced looking helicopter, which I think will be good. Now I haven't done the gunner station that much, not yet anyway. I've painted a few little buttons to go with the decals and everything, but the gunner's upfront controls don't come into it until we get the whole fuselage assembled. So we'll get to that when we get to it. Once you're done with the immediate internal, we've got some very simple fuselage assembly that goes on. Very, very simple. We've got the skids that just plug in, and then we've got these sponson pieces that go on. There's really not a lot of internal, this is an old kit, remember, so we don't have all the cool electronics. There's no aftermarket kit. Now, we could spend a lot of time scavenging and cannibalizing parts from other kits to build hydraulics and all that, but we're not going to do that here. We're just going to build the kit as is. So we'll get this on, just get it aligned. There's no positioning pins or anything for these pieces, so you just got to align them just right. Engine intakes are another area where it really lets us down. There's nothing even visible in there when it's all done, so I didn't bother to paint anything inside the intakes at all, just assembly, and that's it. Weapons bay, another place where you're not going to see a whole lot of detail. This machine gun is minimal at best, and the whole fuselage is just an open shell inside. So the weapons bay really is only these launch rails for the missiles, and it's the mounting for the machine gun and a couple of doors that you can mount open or closed. And that's really it. So without doing some major work, it's pretty bare inside. The Brimstone missiles are on their way. They should be here in literally a couple days, but there's still lots to do before they get here. I'm a little limited as to what I can do before they get here, and that's kind of focused some of the things I'm doing. At first I thought I was kind of stuck because I thought I was going to need them to finish the weapons bay, which I would have to have installed to put the fuselage halves together. But I was thinking of a couple different things. Number one, if you kind of, yes, it's cut up, and we'll talk about why in a second. To put the weapons bay in there, and then let me see if I can get this mounted in and just show real quick how it looks. You really can't see anything. Once the fuselage is assembled and the weapons bay is in, I mean, you can barely even see the ordnance that's in there, and it's very hard for me to get this thing mounted properly in there. But I mean, you wouldn't even, you could kind of see that they're there, but what's the point of getting these really nice, turns out they are resin, not plastic, but these really nice aftermarket resin missiles, and then not even be able to see them in there. Now, this is, just to illustrate, this is one of the kit's terrible, very bad Hellfire missiles. This is an Edward Brasson Hellfire. Now, at first I thought the Hellfires here wouldn't even fit, which is why I ordered the Brimstones. But as you can see, they're about the same size. And yeah, they actually would fit in the kit. So we'll have some really nicely detailed weapons to go on here. But, so with all that taken into account, here's something else I realized. I don't know what the theoretical mechanics behind this helicopter are, but I can tell you that missiles sitting inside this fuselage are not going to go anywhere at all. So what I'm going to do is that's why I cut this section off. I'm going to leave these little struts, these supports that anchor this, because it's the machine gun here. I'm going to anchor this into the fuselage, but I cut this little missile mount tray free. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to scratch build some little extensions so that when we mount this inside the fuselage, I hope I'm not going crazy with this, but this will be mounted internally as it should, but we will have, let me get that right there, the missile mounts extended out from the fuselage that will show off the missiles that we got, but also in sort of a realistic sense tell the story of when they're ready to shoot these missiles, these bay doors open, it extends out, just like on the Comanche, the way the Comanche internal bays would work. They'd open, they'd extend out, and they'd fire these missiles, and then it could withdraw back in and close the bay doors. Because from the way that it's built, the kit itself, there's no way they would be able to fire those missiles. So what I've got to do is do a little quick engineering. Took a little bit of a measurement and just build something that, number one, fits within the confines there, but looks a little semi-true to life that just might show something. I don't want to just put, this on a stick sticking out from here, that just looks like that. But I want to build something out of styrene that's not overly complicated. Some kind of, suspend the disbelief that this might be a real actual thing that happens. It'll give us a little bit more to look at, and it'll show off those missiles really nicely. A couple other things to think about as we're doing this. They're on both sides. These pieces here, they're intake doors, I believe. Now they're built to be movable. They're terrible. Again, terrible. I don't know what they're for or why. You know, they don't work very well as movable pieces. So on each side, I tried to fit them into the fuselage as best I can and glue them shut. This one fits a little bit better than this one. I guess in the grand scheme of the model, it's cool that they try to put all these movable parts on this thing, but I'm gonna just fill that in and sand over and say there's no intake door there. It is what it is. I'm not sure why they have those movable intakes, what they're intakes for or what they do. You know, it doesn't make any sense. I thought maybe at first that the missiles shoot through there, but then why would there be those bay doors that could load it? But even if that was true, only one missile would be lined up to shoot through there. It doesn't make any sense. And the instructions don't really say anything. They say they're intake doors, not missile shooting doors. So whatever. They're very sloppy fit pieces, as you can see. And the mechanical parts there just don't work well at all. So I'm going to spend some time just fiddling and cutting plastic and messing with it, and I'll show you what I've come up with when it's time. This is my solution for our missile mounting problem. It's not very fancy, just some plastic rod and plastic strip, but it will let us, if I can get it to sort of hold position as we look at it. Yeah, it's hard to make it sit still without gluing it into place. But we're just about ready to assemble the fuselage and all those pieces. So a rough fit of how this is going to go with our little gun turret sticking out of the bottom. This is kind of how this will fit with those launch rails extended out. And it kind of, you know, it's a very simplified example of what we could do with a lot more work. But again, you're not going to see a lot of it. You know, it's just going to be a little bit sticking out with the idea that it is, you know, extendable and it withdraws back into the fuselage after you shoot the missiles. And that's what's important. It lets us see those really fancy missiles we're going to put in there. And it gives the idea that these missiles live within the fuselage. They extend to be fired outwards. And I put some nose weight in there, by the way, to help it sit. But they extend. The missiles can be loaded in and in there for stealth purposes, extend to fire and whatever. Tells a little bit more of the story of this helicopter that we're building, and really lets us see some of the details we're putting in there. Because otherwise, you can't even see the armament that's in there. And if you take a look on the box, if you look right there, I mean, you can't see it at all. Here's another image on the box. Unless you're down, like put your head on the table or the shelf, you can't see the armament at all. It's almost like a waste to do that. So let's make something scratch built really quick, really easy, just to show off what we've got going on inside. Just to look at the construction on how it was done, in case anybody's interested. So I just sliced, you can see, like I said before, that little mounting part, I sliced that free of the part with the missile rail on it. Then I cut just a little bit extra the width of this styrene rod to let it mount in there, as if maybe, you know, just imagining that it retracts in and then this part meets flush with that part. Took one piece of plastic strip and then reinforced it with another piece of rod, just because this needs to hold just a little bit of weight of those resin missiles, and that's it. I mean, very, very simple, very easy modification to make. Nothing hard at all to do. The kind of thing anybody could do with just a little bit of time, imagination, and a ruler, just to figure out measurements to make sure it's even on both sides. So let's get to doing the fuselage and putting everything together in there. Well, couple small issues in the cockpit. Now, these are made with hinges to be openable, and that, I mean, is a novel feature, but they just don't sit right to do that. You know, it's a lot of playing with to get them to close and sit right again. I'm afraid that if we leave it like that, it's going to encourage people to mess with it. These skids are fragile. I've broken them twice, at least both sides already, and they're glued back on. So we don't want that. And one other problem is, now, you see this, it's not really glued in right now. It's just tacked in, really. But the instrument shroud, the combing there for the up front display for the gunner, it's supposed to, let me just take this one out. It's mounted in a way where you're supposed to be able to open and close the canopy, but without massively modifying this whole thing, and I don't know if you're going to be able to capture this on camera right now, this does not open and close with you still being able to mount this in any reasonable way. It only opens part way, and again, then we risk somebody jerking it open and popping it off, or something. I mean, not that I had a lot of really well done models, you know, on display in my former office, in the Squadron Weapons and Tactics shop. You know, that's where my last assignment was. And people that don't build models don't understand. They are not for picking up and playing. I mean, picking up and looking at it sometimes, but not. They just don't understand they're not toys. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut some of these little J hooks, and I'm going to mount these on there. I'm just going to glue the canopies down. I don't think there's any real reason to open them. You're going to be able to have a pretty decent view of what's going on inside regardless. They're very, very large glass flat panel, great visibility inside, as you can see. Taking a look there, you know, you can look right on in and see everything that's going on with the controls, with the custom stuff that's done. I'm just going to glue down the canopies there. I started the work on sanding. There's a lot of sanding that goes into making this nice and smooth all the way around. There was some fit problems with the two fuselage halves. One of the things I didn't think of was painting the interior prior to gluing everything down. But you know what? I'll just try to hit the inside with primer as best I can. We're not going to see a whole lot because these doors are going to be positioned like so over there. Another good reason we have these little extended missile racks. But a lot of sanding to get things to just fit evenly and line up without any kind of overbite of one side from the other. With this little sensor door open, this gun makes even less sense over there, but we'll look at it when we're all finished again. But it's there. Rotor fits on very nicely, so it spins, yay. My mistake is not a permanent one. But the rotor will fit on nice when it's all done. So this is pretty much, this is like 99% of the assembled helicopter and what it's going to look like. So what I need to do now, we've got to fill, putty the spaces for those doors. We've got to fill a little bit of space on the underside of these rotors. Yeah, probably no one will see it, but let's just do a thorough job, you know? And just a little more filling and shaping. Mask off the canopies. Another reason to glue the canopies down is because they are very thin and sometimes they don't want to fit just right. So I'd really like to just get the interior all done and just fit them in place, glue them in place, and have them not move anymore. And I think that's cool. So yeah, just about done. And I can't wait to start the paint job. I'm really starting to play with the idea of doing it in the Air Force old rescue camo. And putting the Air Force decals on there. But I think I'll probably just go with Marines, because I build so little Marine Corps stuff, you know, since, again, my background is Army and Air Force. I'm a little prejudiced towards building that stuff, so I think it's going to be a good exercise for me to build a Marine ship and spread the love. So, oh, And by the way, I got the Brimstones in, and they are lovely, very nice, just like the Hellfires. I had no idea that Brimstones were actually larger missiles than Hellfires. I know the capabilities of Brimstone. I know aircraft they realistically carried on and how they work. I had no idea they were actually larger than Hellfires. I really didn't. So my whole thing was I thought they were slightly smaller than Hellfire, and putting them on that rack would have been a better size fit than Hellfire. As you can see, they are a bit bigger. So a little awkward. They still will fit with actual dimensions in there, and I think I like that. They have these little slots, these runners on them that will fit into the launch rail, so I'm going to carve out the launch rail just a little bit, because that'll be a perfect way for us to put that in there and line it up perfectly. But yeah, the Brimstone actually does fit perfectly, just perfectly, with no wiggle room at all inside there. So I think I'll use them, and that will retain the Hellfires, all of them, for our Comanche project. Another thing I thought about doing was the ALQ 144 disco ball, little infrared countermeasures device. But I also checked the Comanche. The Comanche is supposed to be low observable. It doesn't have one, so we'll go without it on. It's just so little going on exterior wise. I wanted to give it something. We'll see as we go. So let me finish up the interior, get everything down, and then we'll look at it as it's ready for priming and painting. We are now just about ready to move to our final steps for painting. So I don't know if you can see in there. I hope you can. I've got everything done. I just got to paint the frame around the gunner's HUD. I've got his upfront controls, his instrument panel done, and it's nothing too complicated, but it looks good enough, you know. I had a real interesting time wrestling with the canopy. I cut that little J hook off because it was not going to sit right. And I had to mess around with fitting the canopy on and figuring out exactly where this sits so we can get it to close right and everything. So that is just about done now. Obviously, I did the filling and sanding around these intakes to make them look nice. I finished this little sensor. I had to put some styrene rod in there because there's nothing to hold it. You know, there's nothing to hold it there except this one little lip. So I needed to give it a little bit of support to have it sit nicely in some kind of position there evenly. And I've been working on, I assembled a Brimstone, which they're really nice. Let me show you. So this is the missile that comes in the kit, and it's just a really bad representation of anything at all. And then you can see the Brimstone next to it. And here is a Hellfire. So much more detail on either of these than this little thing. It's not accurate, it's not shaped right, whatever. What I've been doing on these rails is taking this little saw and just making a little groove in there. And I left one so that I can actually show you the process here. Putting the saw in the groove and basically slowly making this groove a little bit deeper so that I can take my my panel line scriber and then give it some real depth and width so that we can fit these little tabs that come on the Brimstone, and we can fit it in there and have it sit really nicely. It kind of holds the Brimstone right in place for us. If you can see these little tabs that go there, and they would attach to the rail if we were going to use the resin triple rack that the Brimstone actually goes on. And look at that, it just holds the Brimstone on perfectly. Of course we're going to glue it anyway, but the Brimstone fits perfect into that that bay. Now, I put on one of the doors here. The doors are really tricky because there's nothing on there. Let me get the other door for you. And you can look at it here on the sprue. There's nothing there. I mean, you're basically just gluing this to this, and to get it most accurate, you're gluing the corner to the corner here. It's just a poorly made kit. So what I did was I don't know where the piece went. There it is. I janked an actuator from an F-22 Raptor for the weapons bay, the main weapons bay, because I'm building one of those just for myself to commemorate my time at Tyndall. And I'm going to do with the weapons bay closed so I don't miss this. And I made myself a little actuator to, you know, I'm always, like I was saying, giving it life, right? Realistically, there'd be something to open that. But it also gives some kind of structure to hold this door on. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Going to glue very carefully corner to corner right there, but then I'm going to use this actuator rod to hold it open and give some kind of support to the door. Once I do that, then pretty much our construction here is done. So that'll be it for this video. What we'll pick up with in the next video, we will get the canopies masked and glued down. We'll do a little bit more detailing, just some quick work in the cockpit. I'll actually take you through the process of the build for the Brimstone missile. We'll get everything wiped down. We'll get everything primed. We'll start our painting, and then our clear coats, our decals, and I have, by the way, the sanding done on the rotor blade as well. So we'll go from the construction phase to the painting detailing phase in the next video and get this thing looking like a military chopper. Hope you guys have enjoyed step one, phase one, building this little guy and all the little tweaks we've done. And hopefully you'll enjoy phase two, which is making it go from a little plastic guy to a realistic looking helicopter. So please join me, and I'll see you all then.